de nacionalismo negro do Marcus Garvey, depois que evolui para o Malcolm X e para as Panteras Negras. Por que você acha que se voltou a partir dos anos 70 para esse nacionalismo sectário? Assim?
Yeah, so the nationalism of Marcus Garvey, which was a cultural nationalism, didn't end with him. It continued, and Malcolm X himself came out of a cultural nationalist background in the Nation of Islam, and he moved in the universalist direction. But there were other organizations. So the Black Panthers came out of a political milieu, which included the US organization of Ron Karenga. I talk about Amiri Baraka's membership in that organization in the book. And so cultural nationalism persisted through to the 70s alongside revolutionary nationalism of the Panthers. And there was something that united revolutionary nationalism and cultural nationalism, which was the attempt to see state structures transform through the incorporation of black people. And after the legal victories of the civil rights movement by 1965, it became much more possible to have black people entering into the state, black politicians. And so this is what began to happen, and black politicians called upon the ideology of nationalism and used the nationalist mobilization of the grassroots as the basis for entering into the state. However, they entered into the state at the time of the crisis of capitalism. And at this point, politicians of all kinds began to impose austerity. And so these politicians had to impose austerity on the very movements that put them where they were. And this is a classical problem. Social democracy is the same problem. And so they had to demobilize their constituencies. They had to institute austerity policies. And in order to do that, even though they came out of these mass movements, they had to use racial solidarity as a justification. You should continue to vote for a black politician because a black politician represents you, even though this black politician is harming the majority of the black community, which is poor, which will suffer when welfare policies are cut, and so on. And so I think this is the material basis for the conversion of the nationalist ideas from an oppositional one to justification.
You talked about, in your book, you begin talking about the Combahee River Collective, how their proposal of identity politics was reversed in its opposite. And I would like you to talk a little bit more which should be the place of identity in the left universalist movement, and how it could be applied today.
I believe that the thesis of the Combahee River Collective about identity politics is one that is specific to a political situation. I don't think that it can be taken to be the general definition of identity, because if identity politics were generalized, what the Combahee River Collective says is the most radical politics comes out of our identity. If another group said the same thing, if a group of white men said the same thing, it would be meaningless, or it would be very reactionary. So I think the Combahee River Collective made an intervention into a specific political situation, which was that in the existing social movements, in the feminist movement, it was assumed that white women could represent all of women. In the black nationalist movements, it was assumed that the leadership of black men would be beneficial for everyone, including black women. And so they were opposing these hegemonic yet exclusionary identities with the idea of identity politics. Now, as I was suggesting with reference to the language of identity in Europe, I think that these other meanings of identity have become stronger. And so I think that certainly in the US discussion, identity politics has come to represent something which is not coming out of social movements, but about individual recognition by the state, which is absorbed completely into the status quo. The Democratic Party, neoliberal politicians can all use identity in order to gain a constituency and to rationalize their programs, which go more and more to the center. We are seeing this already. We saw this already in the last election in the US, and we are seeing it more and more with the Democratic candidates that are debating. And so I argue that we have to draw a distinction and say identity politics is now, what I say in the book, the neutralization of movements against various kinds of oppression. And we need a new political language to talk about movements that go beyond this. And I think that that is the important task for social movements today, is to put forward a new language to explain a politics that goes beyond what exists.
But do you think the identity politics like the CRC proposed has a role today? It could be used in a proper way?
I think that the neoliberal associations with the term have become too powerful to use this terminology in an emancipatory way. In terms of the practice of the Company River Collective, to challenge exclusionary identities and to build coalitions between different groups, these are very important and must be incorporated today. I think that when you read the statement of the Company River Collective out of context, you don't understand that their politics was about building coalitions. And the whole point of challenging exclusionary identities was to be able to build real coalitions in which some members are not subordinated to the others. So the practices that I associate with the Company River Collective of coalition building and challenging exclusion, I think certainly must be part of an emancipatory politics today.
É possível fazer uma projeção no sentido de para onde nós estamos indo nessa luta específica da identidade, se nós estamos caminhando para uma espécie de acomodação e uma atuação funcional para governos, inclusive como esses estranhos do Trump e Bolsonaro, ou se exatamente em função dessa nova conjuntura política nós podemos imaginar uma radicalização mesmo dos movimentos identitários, uma espécie de um retorno a uma politização do conceito de identidade, de classe. É possível fazer alguma projeção, prever alguma tendência nesse sentido?
I think that the weakness of identity politics, of liberal identity politics in relation to the right, is that it needs the right to be scandalized about. That the political energies all become focused around reacting to the right, reacting to some stupid thing Trump said. Indeed, it may be a harmful thing to say, it may be atrocious in all respects, but meanwhile, politicians are instituting policies. They're having material effects. And while we are busy on Facebook writing about how angry it made us feel, how traumatized we feel about a sentence, there are immigrants in concentration camps. And what is happening? So I think this is the complicity between liberal identity politics and right-wing authoritarianism.
If you think that facing this very threat that is posed by this governments, if you see that anyhow those movements can turn back to confront it, turn back to the original meaning of the identity politics, there is no way that it could happen.
No, I think that it is possible to reassert an emancipatory politics today. An emancipatory politics will be against all forms of oppression, racism, sexism, exploitation, and so on. but it will not be just a laundry list of things. It will be about transforming one social structure. And there will be strategic decisions about how to make this transformation. It will not be, we have to make a list of every oppression now and make sure that we have to think strategically. Now, I think this is possible. I don't know if it is likely. I don't know if the way that the left is moving now, that there is the promise of such a development. But in our everyday practices, in our way of relating to political initiatives and organizations, I think that we have no choice but to push in this direction.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.